Wow. Well, hello, Greg.
Hi, Keith. How are you today?
Well, I think I'm okay. You know how every day is another day?
Absolutely. Every day's a fresh start, isn't it the truth?
Fresh- That that is the truth. That's the beauty of life, is that whatever happened yesterday, it's gone.
That's right. It's in the past.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
in the past. Unfortunately, we spend too much time in the past, and in the future, we forget that there's actually a present.
That's true. It's
So
a balance.
speaking of the past,
What a
um,
segue.
yes, great segue. So the past and the present and the future technology is, I've always been fascinated with technology. I'm still fascinated with technology, and I'm fortunate enough, actually should say we're fortunate enough that we've lived through the technology boom that started really in, well, some people say the late 70s. I like to think it's the early 80s, at least
Yeah,
the desktop computing world.
right. That's what I was
And
thinking too.
yeah, so tell me a little bit about what your early memories of technology were. And you can go back to, I mean, I go back to, I remember my Texas Instruments calculator that did sine, cosine, and tangent. I was
Yeah.
blown away by that. I mean, the fact that I could do it on a calculator. So that's how far we go back. So tell me
Yeah.
about
I,
your memories.
so I don't go far, but I don't go back far enough to have you ever used a slide rule, although I do remember seeing them. But really, I think, in high school, there was no technology. We had typing class.
Yeah,
That was
they
the
weren't even
extent.
electric.
Electric typewriters. But then, I got into college, so early 80s. Like you just said, that was really the first time where I got introduced to technology in the form of uh, desktop computers and software like Lotus 123 and the early word processing softwares that existed. But it was all, even my first job, we had a department of probably 20 people. We had two computers. So you shared, right? You had your time slot and you shared. And you had those big floppy disks, right? That you could store about 300,000 bytes of data on. I mean, literally bytes. I mean, it was unbelievable compared to today. In our department also, we didn't have a portable computer. We had what was called a luggable. So the thing was the size of a suitcase, right? And you literally took off the front of it, and that was your keyboard, you know? And but it was literally the size of a suitcase. And we would use
This
that
was
on, what's that?
was this pre-desktop?
No, this would have been again early 80s. So
Okay.
it would have been post desktop but pre laptop computer. And I think literally the term that they used for them was called luggables. So that they were somewhat portable. Like I said, we took them on trips with us, but they were not. By today's standards, you'd chuckle at the size of these things. The other thing I think about in technology, maybe not so much in business, but in at home is VCRs or video recording equipment. Again, when I first started having kids, we had this big recording thing, that just you set it on your shoulder. You looked like a Hollywood movie producer when you were using this thing. You'd put a full
Yeah.
VHS tape in there, and you'd go ahead and tape. And today now, where if you even have a video camera, the thing fits in in the palm of your hand. And it's incredible how technology is changed. How about for yourself, Keith? What do you think of when you think of your early introduction to computers and technology?
Well, computers, my earliest experience with computers was when I opened my first store. I opened in the end of '85, and I think I bought computers for my first store around '87. So I really did not embrace the computers in personal life at all. So probably '89. And I remember because I bought my first computer, and I think I mentioned to you in an earlier segment that it didn't even have a hard drive. All it had was a floppy disk. And the floppy disks, you had 5 1/4 and 3 1/2. 3 1/2
Yeah.
was the hard, smaller
Right.
storage. And I was so fascinated. I started reading up on DOS, which was the operating system that IBM
Right.
had.
Disk operating system. Yeah.
Right. And that Bill Gates, I don't know if he purchased it. Somehow he wound up with it.
Right.
And it's the beginning of, Windows. They developed Windows after that.
Mhm.
So I was really interested in learning about it and how it worked, and understanding directories, and things of you'd store certain things that you would save it into a directory. A lot of that's very similar today. Today it's a folder in your drive. I've gone through every aspect of the growth of technology on both the business and the personal side. So when my first computer in the business, by the way, the one without a hard drive was at home. In business, my first computer had a 40 megabyte drive. Okay. You can't fit like one program on a computer. It's 40 megabytes is nothing.
Right.
And of course, as you got to the next version of the computers, at a 40, then I had an 80. When you got over 100 megabytes, it was like, wow. Once Windows, though, came along, you needed a lot more space.
Right.
Because remember, there was no online software access. The whole operating system was on that hard drive.
Mhm.
So if you're going to be able to use software, you obviously had to have a large enough hard drive. So I think at that point that you had to have like 500 megabytes minimum in order to have use Windows. I'm really going back a long way.
Remember, you had two issues, right? You had storage, but then you had operating memory as well, right? So you had to save all these programs and your data on a hard drive, but then you had to retrieve all this stuff into your, they always called it ROM, right? Your operating memory. And there would be times where you'd open back then we used to use Lotus for spreadsheets, and you might only be able to open one spreadsheet at a time. In fact, sometimes spreadsheets were too big to open.
Oh man, I could remember some of the frustrations. The real frustration was when you get online and you try to get online, and of course it was all dial up then. There was no DSL, and so the speed was so slow, and you'd hear that sound of it's like just waiting for it to finally connect. And then it finally
Praying.
Yeah, and
Just
then you try to
praying,
get
okay,
in.
connect this time.
Type in like a web address. Oh, and it would take forever for the site to come up. I don't know, it's like it's so funny because you think about how did we even get through that era of frustration, because the whole idea of computers was to, develop efficiencies in our
Right.
work.
Yep.
And I don't remember whether it did or it didn't. All I know is that, at least for me, I was so enamored with technology and the thought, especially having multiple locations, that I could actually share data, and I did so many crazy things. I know I was way ahead of my time in terms of ordering the latest and the greatest software. I think I bought the first Office suite, which was Word, Excel.
Yeah.
Then it was Access, which was a database
Oh, yeah.
building program. But I would sit and play with this stuff all the time. I mean, I just to learn it, and it was fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. But you're right how there was a gap between when we started using computers until the internet came along. You think of how clunky that was to share data, right? To generate, you had to be so cognizant of the size of the files you were creating. I can't tell you how many times I lost data because of space issues, right? I
Yeah.
built something that was too big. I wasn't saving frequently enough.
There was
And
no auto
like
save back then, let's put it
like
that way.
and like
What
you
about when a
said,
hard drive would crash? Okay.
yeah,
I could remember, because they did have, I don't know if back then if it was the Geek Squad was even around yet. But you'd have to actually send your hard drive to some company that actually would recover data.
yeah,
Oh, it was so painful. I mean, just talking about it, I'm feeling that angst. It's like, oh my God, how did we survive? And now it's like if I get a rolling ball with my Apple Mac, I'm like, what? It's like nothing's ever fast enough, ever
right,
anymore. It's
right,
like we're bombarded with the latest and the greatest. Okay, what's the next version coming out? iPhones, everybody gets the new iPhone like at least every couple of years, at least.
yeah, yeah. And now you think about how apps are developed for tablets and phones. I mean that was completely like 20 years ago. You didn't even the word app meant had no meaning when it came to technology, right? And now it's everything. It,
Well,
it's it, it's amazing over the last 20 years, really, how sophisticated the internet has become and how business has adapted to it. Because at first, the internet was pretty clunky at first too. Like you said, the dial-up, right? Can you imagine being in a store and today and going to buy something and having to dial up an internet connection?
that's why e-commerce was much slower to take off, because there was you putting payments. People were not willing to have their information, their payments information, online.
Yeah,
And obviously there was fear of fraud and things like that. So
right.
yeah, it was, and I feel like I've been through every painful step of the evolution. It's like, yes, I could remember it like it was yesterday. And I love getting new computers. It's like, remember when we finally went to Max, my brother was working for me and he's a graphic designer. And we bought those futuresque colored, like encased. I don't know if you remember, it looked like a spaceship kind of
Oh
thing.
yeah,
It was,
yeah, yeah,
it was so cool. And because the big thing about the Macs was they were much better when it came to graphic design. So
right.
agencies would use those, but there were so many things that I should say today there are so many things you can use technology for. Where back then in my stores, you know, we had like a point of sale program for tracking the daily sales,
Mhm.
you know, and reporting, but not very sophisticated
Right,
at all.
right. So Keith, I think you'd agree we're probably at the doorstep of another technology boom with AI. Right? I mean, AI is something, 10 years ago, we weren't talking about AI. 5 years ago, we were maybe talking about it, but there was no practical application for it. Talk a little bit about, what you've encountered with AI and just what your from a business standpoint, what do you think the opportunity is, the concern is? If I'm a business owner, what do I need to be concerned about or ready for when it comes to AI?
Well, there's a whole host of things that they talk about in terms of the fear of AI, in terms of copying, and plagiarism, and kids not, being able to learn. Not that they're not able to learn, is that they're cheating. I can go in and to ChatGPT and go, I need a report. I need it to be 750 words on the history of technology.
Mhm.
Okay. Or I need it to be 10 pages. I want a font size of 12 points, double spaced. I mean, literally, the way AI works, I'm still fascinated. I'm as fascinated about AI as I was about the technology of 40 years ago with the advent of desktop computing.
Mhm.
And I've taken the same position with AI that I took with technology 40 years ago. I fear nothing. When it comes to technology, and I'm what I'm saying, I feel so strongly about is that this is not like, running across the street hoping you're not going to get hit by a car and get killed. Literally, there's very little you can do, okay, that you're going to hurt yourself by trying it and becoming proficient,
Mhm.
because it is amazingly helpful in terms of time savings.
Yeah.
And I'll use an example of our podcast. As you know, I post our podcast and we do clips and things like that, but I've started doing it. I'm sure you've seen it come across your profile. I take our podcast and I just take the parts about sales, which is really my area of expertise. I take the transcript of the podcast and I create an article out of it for my newsletter.
Mhm.
Okay. That newsletter is my voice, because I'm not taking something that's made up by ChatGPT. I'm taking stuff that I've said. Okay. And that's why I said I need to teach you this, because the same thing I'm doing for my newsletters, you could be doing for yours, and anybody that
Right.
wants a newsletter. Now that whole thing, I've taken a 30 to 40-minute podcast, which I'm creating 10 to 15 clips of our podcast. I'm creating, captions about that particular podcast, and I'm creating a newsletter out of it. So think about that. That's just one piece of content that
Mhm.
I've created 12 to 15 pieces of content to post on social.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and you went into a lot of detail there, but I think, from a business owner's standpoint, the part I heard of that I really totally agree with is you should not fear this new technology. As a
No,
business owner, you should embrace it, right? Because it's coming. It's coming. You're not going to
well,
stop
no,
it.
it's beyond coming. It's here.
Yeah, it's here,
Okay.
right?
Yeah,
So
it's here. Yes.
to not embrace it would be ludicrous, right? It'd just be silly because, like you said, You're not gonna stop it. And are there downsides or negatives of it? Possibly, as you mentioned, but there's a lot of upside as well. That I think as business owners, by adapting it, embracing it, it can help our business tremendously. It'll change some businesses just, on their heads. But other businesses, I think, everyone should be looking at how they can adapt AI into their business model.
So if you look at technology, there's always going to be a good and bad. There are people out there that will find ways to utilize it for bad.
Right.
Okay. There are kids that they don't want to write a report. Okay. The fear is that we're raising a bunch of lazy kids that are never going to learn anything because they have technology that's taken over the world. Well, that's really up to parents and teachers.
Yeah.
We don't control that. So the thing to do is embrace it and show somebody how to use it properly. So again, what I said to you about I want to write a report about the history of technology, what would I have done pre-AI? Okay, here we go. Ready? Google search, history of technology.
Yep.
I get 20 sites. I pick 3. I start grabbing content. I start putting it together. I start writing my report. You cut and paste. You put your own, thoughts and feelings. What that process is many hours. What AI has done, it takes all the content that were in those 20 sites and it aggregates the important points. Now, again, this is called prompt engineering. That's like the future. It's like garbage in, garbage out. If you know how to say in writing the instructions, you will then be able to get something back. Now, did you get back exactly what you want? Sometimes yes, sometimes no, but still doesn't, have anything. So I'll say, okay, I'm having a conversation with my personal assistant in ChatGPT. Okay,
Right.
That's great. I need you to provide me, in addition to this content, I want to cite statistics, data, and the source. Okay, boom, I get back, that 30% of companies that don't train salespeople properly are losing 10 to 15% of their business. I just made that up, okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
But if that came back as part of the report, because it came off of all the data that was aggregated, I want to know if that's true. Now, I can go to the old school of Google search and go, is this statistic true? And I got a whole bunch of stuff. But instead, I'll say, I need to be able to determine the accuracy of this statement. Okay, and I want you to cite a source and a time. Date, time, source. Boom, comes back. There are 3 sources for this, XYZ, ABC, and DEF. Okay, I only want one source. Okay, what's the most credible source of those 3? Boom, I have the most credible source. Now I got a document. Okay, I really don't like the way this flows. Okay, I believe this paragraph is in the wrong order. I think it should be paragraph 3 following this. And I'm actually asking, like I'm talking to somebody, do you agree with my assessment? You're correct. Or no, I think it flows well. So think about how insane this is. This is like Lost in Space with the robot. It's like, this is the world we live in right now. Now, think about that. What I just said to you took 5 minutes. It comes back, the answers so quickly. It's almost embarrassing. It's almost like, but remember, if I don't have the knowledge and experience to know what I'm looking for and how to have done it in the pre-internet days of writing a report, okay, this is called logical thinking, and I believe our schools are going to have to get to the point where we're teaching kids how to think logically, not necessarily, how to write a perfect report, but how to research. So all that's going to come as you get into your career, researching different things and topics. So
Right.
I hope that was on a level that people will understand, that I didn't go, so far above.
No, I'm sure it'd be very clear. I think you are right that there's a educational aspect around AI that has people questioning, are we going to be able to shortcut learning opportunities? But that's the internet did the same thing, right? The internet, remember pre-internet research? You went to the library, you pulled hardcover books off the shelf until you were, and you made notes, right? I think the challenge is to be able to say, look, we've been able to make that process more efficient. So how do we use the time we're saving to better educate, whether it's children or whether it's young employees? How do we take that time and put it to better use? If if it used to take 10, 20, 30 hours to do that project, and now you can do it in basically 10, 20, or 30 minutes, think of all the time that frees up. Well, let's use that time to improve our business, right? How do we make our business better, because now we're not spending all that time generating data. We've actually got it at our fingertips now.
That we learn is just information. It's practical application of what you learn. So it's like, if I don't use it, you lose it. You don't remember these things, but once you practically apply it, that's why I encourage people to don't be afraid of AI.
Yeah.
Think about the tasks that you do on a daily basis. What are you doing? I can ask, and I've done this. Okay, I need a spreadsheet. Okay, I need the following fields. Okay, I need this field to have a drop down. I need this field to be calculated, which is the field times, 10%. I can get a whole spreadsheet with that prompt. Okay, 30 seconds.
Right.
And in a format that I could download into Excel or into Google Sheets.
Yep.
Now, again, I could have done it manually. I've created pro formas, God knows why. Another thing that I know, but it's not my area of expertise. I mean, I don't want to do this, but again, you own a business. Guess what? Sometimes you just got to learn. So until you have the money to pay somebody like you to do that.
No, and I think that's the truth about technology. Whether we started out this conversation talking about, the advent of personal computers and what that did for our lives. Technology has always eventually made our lives easier, more efficient. I mean, let's think about farmers, right? Farmers used to be out in the field with a shovel and a hoe, right? And now today they've got technology that would blow us away, right? So again, we shouldn't be afraid of it, and we shouldn't say, I'm not going to adapt that, because I don't think it's going to be here to stay. I can tell you, all of this technology is here to stay, and if you're not embracing it, your competitor is going to. And if your competitor gets that leg up on you, we've talked about this before, Keith, before you know it, in the blink of an eye, you're chasing, right? And now you're you're behind the eight ball. You're the company that isn't being chosen by the clients, the customers, because of whatever that AI has been able to do for your competitor, and it's not being done for you.
So, that's exactly right. But at the end of the day, on anything that you embrace on the tech side, the bottom line is still the bottom line. So if you're an employee, if you're a student, if you're an owner, whatever you are, your success, okay, will still be measured the same way it was 100 years ago.
Yeah,
It's either you can or you can't. So, if you decide that, I don't want to deal with technology. I mean, there's a whole school of people our age that is extremely fearful of technology. They didn't grow up with it, so they don't really want to deal with it. And it's almost like, it's too late, And I disagree.
I would disagree as well, but I would also say to a business owner who says, I'm not ready to embrace another round of new technology. Let's say you got a business owner who's been in business for 40 or 50 years. So they've seen all this come and go, right? And they're sitting there saying, I'm not ready to embrace another round of new technology. Maybe it's time for me to exit out of my business, right? And let somebody else worry about that new technology. And it's absolutely something I think that needs to be considered as a business owner when you're looking at an exit strategy. That maybe the time to exit is when there is about to be a significant seismic shift in your particular business or business in general.
So I see that from two different perspectives. The one is, I'm giving up. That's it. I don't want to deal with this anymore. Or embracing it and getting excited about it, that your stagnant business for the last 10 years can be reinvigorated. So what do you do as a leader, which is an area that you and I talk about, and you coach on this particular area? As a leader, okay, you need to inspire the people around you. So even if you're a little outdated yourself, you can hire somebody and say, you know what, I'm going to bring in somebody who's younger, who's really tech savvy, and we're going to embrace the new normal. Okay? What that does, because you may still exit in the next 5 years, but most likely you're going to get a much better price for your business if you brought everything up to date, and somebody doesn't have to come in and like, basically rip the house down, to bring it into the 21st century.
Absolutely. I mean, as a business owner, you want to sell when your business is as valuable as it's going to be, right? So whether it's technology, whether it's your physical building, your website, all of those things, if a prospective buyer sees those and says, hey, this stuff looks like it's been well maintained, they're gonna pay a premium, as opposed to saying, oh, I'm gonna have to redo their website, I'm gonna have to redo the storefront, I'm gonna have to introduce AI into the business. You're absolutely right. There's more value there in the former versus the latter.
I think our role as coaches is to embrace as much as we can things that even go beyond what our own knowledge base is. And that's why you and I always talk. Obviously, I'm more adept on the technology side, but I'm always looking to like teach you things so that even in your own coaching business, you can talk intelligently about it. You don't necessarily have to do something
right
yourself to be able to talk intelligently about it and the benefits of it. So
right.
Still say knowledge always sells.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's interesting because I was coaching an individual who very tech unsavvy, and a younger guy too. He's in his 30s, but he is not tech savvy. And yet still a lot of our discussions were around how technology was going to impact not just his business, but again, his industry, right? And that's where I think, again, as a business owner, you gotta have your antenna up and understanding what's going on in the marketplace and how it's being affected or disrupted by new technology. Because there, if you put the blinders on, again, excuse me, there's going to be somebody else who's doesn't have those blinders on and is embracing that technology and is really, excuse me, is really going to win the race.
So, I mean, so because you're the numbers guy and that's, you know, as a former CFO and in the finance world, where do you see AI really impacting kinds of information that you need to supply to well, it's a different kind of thing you're doing now with coaching, but nevertheless, you're still going to be trying to guide people in those areas. So
sure, I mean, I think, you know, again, how it's going to impact, let's say, the financial piece of things. I mean, it's going to be throughout the organization, right? Because there may be activities we're doing today that somebody's having to do that can now be done by AI, right? We might be eliminating or repurposing people in what they do on a day-to-day basis. So for one, it can certainly create efficiencies that, as you said before, can go right to the bottom line in terms of the business performance, right? But I think, you know, the other aspect of it is, okay, what does AI allow me to do with my business that I couldn't do before AI? Like, how can I reach customers now, you know, in the AI era that I couldn't before? And not just reach them, but how can I impact their experience with my business that I couldn't before? We've talked before, Keith, about, you know, making that experience for the customer so vibrant and so positive that they just want to come back again and again and again, right? So how do I take AI and how do I turn that into making that experience for the customer better and better and better?
I mean, I'm not sure if that was a question or just a comment, but I think it was both. But I'm going to handle it from a question side. I think when it comes down to the amount of data that's collected these days, you know, that can be utilized, you know, spliced and diced and spit out in a format that's really usable for the people who need it, whether it's on the sales side, whether it's on the finance side, operations, you know, how many, you know, on an inventory side, and think about, you know, you have to manage inventory. We've talked about in past episodes, you know, I had no inventory management system in my stores, yet every store sat with 30 to 40,000 worth of inventory. I just bought, you know, it's like some salesman came in, oh, I like that, I like that, I like that. You know, I was like a kid in the candy store. Anytime I could have new stuff to sell, I was excited. But there became a lot of inventory that should have been sent back because it was, you know, not that it was outdated, it was in the world of eyeglass, you know, apparel, and frames is the word, but, you know, nothing is ever totally outdated. There's always somebody out there that wants to wear something that's, oh yeah, that was from the 80s. I like that. You know?
Sure.
But the thing is that if you or my accountant, you said, well, how much inventory do you have? How many men's frames, women's frames, children's frames do you have? you'd have to actually do a manual count. Okay, well, what's the total value of that? Oh, you want the value of that? I gotta go find invoices. Well, this frame, eventually what happened is that, when it became computerized, you could at least go online to almost like an eyeglass encyclopedia and look up the frame and get the wholesale price. Now, did you pay the price? Maybe I got 20% off. So again, all this information that was not at my fingertips, and the amount of hours I'd have to put in. And you think about companies that were audited pre-computers and everything was manual. They shut down for 3 days to do an inventory.
Yeah.
Literally, I mean,
Yeah.
that. It's like,
I remember doing that. Yeah.
Now you do an inventory. It's like you just a couple of buttons, and say, okay, give me the inventory today, as of today, and compare it to 12 months ago at the same. Okay, boom, I got a report. Again, there's loss factors. It's like, well, we sold X amount of pieces, but we're supposed to have brought in X amount of dollars based on our price structure, and something's wrong. So again, on the auditing side, even if you're not publicly audited, but you're auditing your inventory, because I don't have to tell you that if you're sitting with too much inventory and you're wondering where your cash is.
Right. That's where it all is. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
No, that's very true. And I think those are the kind of processes that through technology have gotten, so much less time consuming today as they were, just a few years ago. Like you said, I mean, companies used to shut down and basically give up a production day or the opportunity to sell so they could count their inventory.
Manufacturing plant closed for a week. Oh, we're not manufacturing this week because we have to do like an audit, on all our materials, and they may have tens of millions of dollars worth of materials. Okay, that they're doing. I got, how many screws did we have? How many washers? Again, I know what you manufacture.
Yeah.
And it's really necessary, even if it's painful, to take the leap. If you're somebody who's been in business a long time, I say do it. I mean, there's no reason not to embrace it, because the value that it will create for your business in so many different ways. I mean, look, if you build a business, you're hoping one day to have an exit, where you can actually sell the business. All those things come into play when someone's, coming to buy your business because you're selling it, and you say, well, I want X. Okay, well, every industry has a valuation formula that's somewhat standard for that industry. So if you're saying to them, well, what's your inventory numbers? What do you say with inventory? Well, approximately, what do you mean approximately? It's like, don't you have a database? Don't you manage your inventory? Don't you have report? Again, so you're sitting there and you're like, something, I really do need to get out of business because I'm so far behind the times.
Well, and I think what's interesting too, Keith, and what you just said is not only are those tools available even to small businesses, the cost of them has come down so radically that small businesses can afford some of the same tools that Fortune 500 companies are using. Now, yes, they're on a different scale. I understand that. But again, I think, Thomas Friedman wrote this book 20 years ago called The World is Flat. And his reference in that was how technology is becoming available to not just the big companies, but to, solopreneurs. And the cost has been, and the scaling of it has been, developed in such a way that even a small shop can afford the tools they need. to, as you said, let's say it's manage inventory as an example. Cost isn't a deterrent anymore when it comes to technology. Because there's always an option out there for to fit
There's
every
always an
price point.
ROI that's recognizable when you utilize tools that create efficiencies.
Right.
Sometimes you don't need as much employee staffing because of the fact, now that's one of the negatives for people who are losing their jobs, but all the more reason why, especially younger people should be embracing technology in a way that they can become experts, because that talent is being looked for today. The businesses that are operating, they need this to survive and to compete.
And again, that's not a reason to not embrace technology, because it's going to happen anyway. And that's just what happens when there's a big technology shift in business, is employees have to figure out how to adapt to that kind of new normal, right? So 40 years ago, it was, when guys like me were coming out of school, they had to know how to use a computer, right? Even though computers were relatively new, if you knew how to use one, that made you a lot more valuable. If you didn't know how to use one, you better learn, right? And so that's just things that happen in our society that employees need to adapt to and learn new skills.
No question. And I really think that our education system is way behind also. The pandemic exposed a lot of things about education. The kids are way behind in their learning. But this notion that somehow AI was going to be a detriment to learning because kids will take advantage. No, it's the teachers supposed to teach. Okay, you're supposed to show students how they utilize this in a way that doesn't limit their learning. It actually expands their learning.
Exactly.
Instead of read more. Okay, instead of having to spend 10 hours making a report, read a book. Okay, here's an assignment. I want you to read a book, and I want you to write, what you got out of this book personally. I mean, this whatever the
as an example, I totally agree. It's all about how we use our time, and as we automate those tasks that, as you said before, used to take hours and hours and hours. How are we using that time? How are we filling in that time? Because if we use it for further learning development, then it's a positive. If we use it to, let kids go screw around and play on the internet, that's probably not the best use of their time. But
well, again, it's parental controls. I mean, it's like I remember as a kid, we'd want to, read things that were not supposed to be read by kids our age. But what's the difference today? It's just that it's on the internet. So it's like,
right.
If you're not watching what your kids are doing, okay, and trying to put some controls in place, kids are going to test. It's just that's what they do. I did.
So Keith, what's your takeaway from today's session?
Fear nothing when it comes to technology. Embrace it. Fear only hurts you. It basically, it's not that hard to dig in. It's right at your fingertips. I spend $20 a month on ChatGPT, and you can get a free version. Okay, I started with the free, and now I have the upgraded because there's some features that I wanted. Play with it. Just ask it a question as if you were asking your teacher. How do I write a book? Okay, you're going to get a whole outline of how to write a book. How do I find information on this subject? I mean, it's all there. I mean, all this is an advanced search engine.
Yeah. Yeah.
on a much higher level. And it's fascinating. It's everything that a business should be embracing today. I embrace it. And again, I'm just at the very beginning of my learning. And on my sales coaching, I plan on utilizing, to teach salespeople how to be better salespeople, utilizing tools that I use for marketing online.
Sure. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's
Yeah.
my takeaway. For someone like yourself who's not as tech savvy, what's your takeaway for today?
And I would totally agree with what you said, and just say that this is technology to embrace and determine how best to use in your business, and not to shy away from it. Again, whether that's a business owner doing this hands-on, or finding the people in their organization who are really good at this stuff, or bringing somebody in who's really good at it. But I think really finding the ways to adapt this technology to your business, so that your business, again, runs better, more efficient. It helps you to grow your business. And I think that's what all of these technologies we've talked about today have had the ability to do, and AI is no different. And again, I think as business owners, I would encourage them to embrace this technology and figure out how they can use it to their benefit in their business.
100%. So now another week's gone. Summer's over. It's just Labor Day.
School's back in session.
School's back in session. The kids are cheating using ChatGPT. All right, Greg, it's been a great one, and we will talk next week.
Sounds good. That was a good topic, Keith. Thanks.
Yes. Thanks.
Bye.